Okay, I'm Jeremy Mickel. I'm a typeface designer. I live in Los Angeles, and I run a type foundry and design studio there. And I've been collaborating with Adidas over the last almost 10 years on a variety of projects for brand fonts, logos, and most recently on some variable fonts. And that's what I'm going to show you today, told through the story of how that project came about, but also just a little bit of Adidas history as well. So Adidas was founded in 1924 as the Dassler Brothers Shoe Factory in Herzogenaurach, Germany. And it was in Herzogenaurach, which is very close to Weimar, where the Bauhaus was founded. And so there was a lot of, just something in the air about this new school of modernism, a focus on form following function, a rejection of ornamentation, and all of these things were very inspirational to the founder of Adidas, Adi Dassler, shown here working on some football cleats. He would work with athletes and study their performance and make subtle tweaks to the shoes to make them, just get better results. He was also a very impressive athlete, and he and his brother lived in Herzogenaurach for most of their lives. Rudolf went on to create his own company, Puma, and both are still headquartered there today. But my client actually is in Portland, which is where the US headquarters is. So the first version of the Adidas logo had this very literal depiction of the track and field shoe and followed the avant-garde typography of the day, this geometric sans. And it's changed over the years, but has still stayed true to the original vision, eventually getting this more Helvetica S in the 60s. But if you're like me, child of the 70s and 80s, although some of you may be younger, this is where I first learned about Adidas, from Run DMC. And they were actually the ones who taught us to say Adidas instead of Adidas, Adi Dassler being the founder of Adidas. That's what the name stands for. So fast forward to the future, and Adidas has been involved in commissioning quite a few custom fonts over the years. This is just a sample of some of them. They've collaborated with Tal Lemming and Jesse Reagan, David Jonathan Ross, and I did one of these, but I'm a little embarrassed about it, so I won't point out which one it is. That all kind of changed in 2011 when Sid Lee Agency commissioned John Carlos Casassin to create the Adineue font. It's based on the original Adidas logo, and it was created in lowercase only in a couple of weights. And this was the start of this new kind of era of the Adidas branding. It was used extensively from 2011 to 2014. And in 2014, Adidas was actually in not quite a bit of trouble, but they were losing market share. They were coming in third in the United States behind Nike and Under Armour, and it was time to really change things up. So that's around when I came in, and one of the first things we did was to look at the Adidas wordmark. And this is common with an older brand that this piece of lettering must have been done by hand at some point, and then it was traced on some sort of digital digitization. But there are a lot of inconsistencies. You as a type designer, you would expect the AD, ID, DA to have similar spacing, but it's actually all over the place. And even the D and the A, they're not the same artwork. So you might think, what's the big deal? But for Adidas, it was causing some problems. They wanted to be able to use this at large sizes. They just wanted something that was true to the original, to the spirit of the original mark. Also, the S had some, very clear problems on the inside. These, they're not clear, they're not smooth curves. They're actually these kinks in the shapes. So this is the previous logo, and then I laugh because this is what would confuse my mom, and she'd be like, I don't understand what you do for a living. You changed this to that. But it works a little bit better, and also it laid the groundwork for all the other work that we did, which was to take the Adineue font, which was started by another designer, but what I did was to come in and build an uppercase and italics, condensed styles. In any mark, there's a lot of DNA about what the design wants to be. So in the Adidas mark, it's obviously, this emphasis on geometry. There's almost no contrast, the thinning of the bowls as they go into the stems. And it's very rational, excuse me, in terms of just the overall geometric construction of the letter forms. So we tried to carry that through as we were designing the uppercase, keeping these proportions consistent. I remember Leon, my client, telling me he wanted the O to just feel like a washer, just a piece of metal that was pure in its physicality. And so we did that. Did the full range of weights and also did an italic, which was fairly steep. Leon likes to think of it as, this runner starting off the starting blocks. And as any type designer would know, it's a bit tricky to take a geometric O and italicize it. Funny things happen to the curves when you do that. There's also a bit of intentional inconsistency in the design. So, the S has this Helvetica terminal, the C and the G are more open. And this takes direct influence from Noisite Grotesque, which has these inconsistencies, but also Futura is one of the most inconsistent fonts where, the many of the shapes in the lowercase are completely different from each other. In Adineue Pro, as we were calling it, this new version with all the new characters and the new styles, there's a wide range of different kinds of letters. And this isn't indecision. It's actually, these are all used in different ways. Adidas has thousands of companies that they work with around the world, sports groups of all different sizes. And so they're using these in different ways on the jerseys and other applications. As I mentioned, we did it condensed. We followed the same logic. And I really felt in this design that it wouldn't work to just take the geometric forms and squish them. They started to lose their energy. So we adopted this more pill shape construction and just pulling the shapes apart. So again, with full range of weights in the condensed. And later we added a hairline and an ultra black just to round out the full range of styles for them. And worked with Ksenia Samarskaya on the Greek and Ilya Ruderman on a Cyrillic. But maybe the most interesting aspect of the Adineue family are these ligatures that we added. And they're inspired by the primary Adidas wordmark, the badge of sport, as they call it, which is incidentally supposed to be, it's the 3 stripes of the brand, as seen from the side of the shoe. So we use the negative shapes from the badge of sport, slicing into the letter forms, and it takes what would normally just be a pretty plain setting of text and gives it just a little bit more personality. And that gives them a lot more control for the brand designers to just implement this across a wide range of products for Adidas. And you'll notice that this is actually a 5-letter ligature, and this is possible because these glyphs are independent. It's not a static, compound ligature. There are a lot of them. There are about 300 of these ligatures in each of the 12 styles, which I would love to have the program that was being described earlier that does the kerning for you. We could have used that here to build all these. So having them as independent, the idea was that, yes, you could get these compound shapes, but also it would allow for fine-tuning. So, if this is being used even larger, these things can be kerned together. The only problem is then when the designers were looking at the glyph palette, all they saw were these, fragmented glyph shapes, and it becomes very confusing. But they figured it out. We hacked the, OpenType code and just used some of the less common features, so swash and titling alternates, turns on the left and the right ligatures. So 2015, this campaign first came out, and I remember I was in Paris going to Robothon in 2015, and it was just thrilling to see this in extruded foam giant in the Adidas flagship store in Paris. And it's been used in sports competitions of all sizes, from local competitions all the way to the Olympics. And again, it's really useful for all of these different properties that they have to manage. If this was just regular set text, it might feel a little bit stale, and just having these little ligatures sprinkled throughout makes it feel a little bit more custom, gives it a little bit more attitude, and allows the teams to have a little more pride in the t-shirts that they're wearing. So that was the first big project that I did with Adidas, and then I helped them with this wordmark for this new product line called Adi Zero, which takes inspiration from athletic octagonal sans serifs. And I was curious to learn that, this shape, which for us is synonymous with sport, actually comes from this physical process, that this was originally done in, wool and, heavy materials, and it was much easier to just cut at an angle rather than, a continuous curve. So that then, leads through and it ends up becoming this collegiate, athletic style. So there was this appetite to have more styles for the Adineue, for Adidas, typography, other than just the geometric sans. And so we created this octagonal and wanted to add some, just a little bit more visual intrigue. It's a bit like Type Together's Pro Tipo font with the chopped diagonals, and also adding these little faceted details on the inside of the shapes. So it gives a little more visual intrigue at large sizes and, kind of falls away at smaller sizes. We filled out the same weight range as Pro and, built the full font. But all the while, ever since I'd started working with Leon, he was talking about the idea of, taking a font and being able to fill any space with typography. So, in the 90s, there was multiple master technology and more recently variable fonts. But at the time, they were only accessible as web fonts. It wasn't something you could use in the design applications. I did a draft of what I imagined, this new variable font could be, doing something, quite narrow, the regular width that we have in the middle, and then what I thought was pretty wide, and Leon said he liked the narrow, and maybe we go 2 or 3 times wider on the wide, and so we did that, and it's, pretty unwieldingly wide, but when you actually set text in it, it doesn't look as wide as it does right here. Building out the full range of styles, all the while looking towards, making this tool that designers could use in a design application. So we worked with a developer named Kenneth Ormandy, and hijacking the Adobe extension system, built this tool which would simulate the variable font experience. So what's actually doing is just calling thousands of different font files and providing this nice interface instead of having to go through and select them. Problem was, it slowed the computers to a crawl. We were installing way too many files. I couldn't even make a text box in InDesign without just getting the beach ball, and so it was very problematic. Hiding these fonts in the this secret user file folder, which was useful because it didn't open all of these fonts in Word or in your email, but still it was problematic. The saving grace was ISType by 2017. I learned that there was going to be support for Illustrator for variable fonts coming soon. And so we got in the beta program and we're able to have some more problems. Variable fonts are a very finicky technology, and it's not, at the time at least, it wasn't well documented, and so it was a lot of trial and error. Why is the kerning not working? Why are these shapes turning inside out? Regular interpolation is fairly straightforward. You just make sure that you have the same number of points, the same number of paths, but variable fonts, they want everything to be just a little bit tidier. One stray anchor can derail the entire thing. But finally, we got it all working. These are some animations done by my friends, Apong Zhu. And this is kind of the joy of variable fonts. You can stretch them. You can go as heavy or as light as you want if you have all of the masters. So just a couple fun examples. But you can also go, a little more elegant with it and show a bit of restraint instead of just, flying all over the place. As we were finishing CHOP, Leon was hinting that this might not be the only variable font for Adidas. So we started thinking about how could we do a version of Pro. So while CHOP has these, narrow, regular proportions, Pro is more classical with the wide O's. We'd already done the condensed and the regular width, but it was a bit of a question of how we were going to, achieve the same result for the other styles. For the narrow, it was fairly straightforward. We really just, extended that pill shape just a little bit further. But the kind of breakthrough was realizing, well, what if we just turn the pill on its side and just pull those shapes apart? And so that became a good approach for the wide styles of Adineue PRO Variable. We also did some chopping of the diagonals in Pro, but not as much as chop. You know, when these shapes get really wide, they get really high contrast, but they also just seem to appear even wider than they actually are. So just chopping them made for a more usable tool. Building out the full range of styles, just as we did in Chop. And everything worked great, except for there were a bunch of just weird little things happening. And again, it's just, why is this? I'm banging my head against the wall. And deep down, I knew what it was. You know, in order to get these shapes to interpolate nicely, I was putting points right on top of each other. So everywhere there's a blue dot, that's where, you know, there's 2 points on top of each other. It's a very useful tool for, you know, being able to blend between a pill and a circle. We just did the opposite for, you know, the shapes on their side. But with variable fonts, it was, you know, just causing problems in the interpolation. So it was just a trial and error process to figure out exactly, you know, it didn't like this start point, so I had to move it to that, to a different point. And finally, I was able to get rid of all of those little annoying errors. Again, Adidas, named for Adi Dassler. I don't know what your experience was, but when I was growing up, I was told it was all day I dream about sports or all day I dream about sex. No, it's named for the guy. And this is what's really great about, you know, having this tool. There is an Adobe interface, but I find it a little bit finicky. You know, it's trapped under a submenu, and it's difficult to select multiple, you know, multiple styles of text. The really great thing, though, that we developed was this fit to width feature. So just with the tap of a button, it will automatically choose the right width and fill the text box as much as it can. That's all great in, you know, a design presentation, but how is this really going to work for Adidas? And the exciting example is this locker room program. You know, there are all of these sports teams around the world. They need uniforms. They need a way to, you know, put all of the team information on them. And so using the fit to width feature, now there's going to be this ability to select, you know, from the different fonts, and the team name will fit correctly. The numbers will fit in the space allowed. So it just becomes this really dynamic system that allows for, you know, fulfilling needs for designers around the world, and rather giving professional tools to a wider range of people who otherwise wouldn't have them. So you can see in this example just a range of T-shirts where, you know, football's all the same width, but when you're laying out so many of these different properties, it's really useful to be able to, you know, just fit to the width. So this is starting to be used. Adidas is using them in a lot of campaigns where, you know, they're just kind of going wild with all of the weights and all of the widths, and it looks great. This was a campaign by the Yarza twins, designed by the Yarza twins out of London for the World Cup last year. But it also gives them the flexibility to, you know, just dial one style. Instead of using all of them, you know, we can just go with one weight or, you know, italicize it. Fake italics, by the way. Those weren't, I didn't actually draw italics for them. Or even, you know, kind of find little areas of this space of all of the different interpolations and create something that is a bit unexpected. So, you know, this is a different kind of subculture of sneakerheads, and it gives it a little bit of an artier feel. So I was always worried about, you know, what would those in-between shapes, you know, in between a circle and a pill, was that just going to be awkward? But I think it actually works pretty well. Just a couple more examples of how they're actually using the fonts. Yeah, it's an exciting time to be working with a company that's willing to invest in this new technology. You know, there's been a lot of talk online about, you know, are people actually going to be willing to pay for variable fonts? Is it going to be detrimental to designers? You know, because are we paying for just one font instead of the full family as we used to? But I think it's actually an exciting time, and you know, it's kind of Willy Wonka's playground of all the things that you can do with this new technology. Now I just want them to introduce me to Beyonce so that I can design something for her new Ivy Park collaboration with Adidas. I'm not joking. I want it to happen. Thank you so much.